Hello and praise the name of the Lord. I hope wherever you are doing fine and that the Lord has preserved you. My name is Grace. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And I want us today to run or to teach about the story of Jonathan and David and how they were friends and how they promised each other of how they would take care of each other. Remember, Jonathan was the son to Saul, and David was the anointed next king to replace Saul, the king. So, in this chapter, I want to talk about keeping promises because the keeping of promises has eaten up so many people. It has made so many people go through troubles, but they have never realized of the impact they made for not fulfilling the promises they made. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it says, if I'm not wrong, that you should not be very fast in promising if you are sure you are not going to fulfill it. Hold it until you feel like doing that thing. You do not have to promise. And remember, I know that so many people have gone through troubles and so many challenges because they never fulfilled the promises they made to some people. For example, you might have promised a certain child a sweet or something, but when you don't keep the promises, remember that child will never forget. Remember that child will put on a grudge on you. She might continue talking to you. She might not show you that she was bitter for not keeping your promise, but she will live to remember that there is something that you promised but you never did it. That will never get out of their mind. The same case you'll find that so many people promise in our village or in our living that I will take you to school, I will do this for you, I will stand in for your school fees. And you find that those people never fulfill. And at times they broke some people who would have been of much help when they would not have promised. Remember, when you stand in to promise that you will stand in a certain gap, nobody would bother to come in the same place and say that he or she would do the same because there is already somebody who has taken that duty. So when you promise something and you never fulfill it, it becomes like a curse against you because the person you promised will be so bitter. They will be questioning why, but at times they do not have that courage to come and face you and ask you why you did not fulfill the promise, because at times they pretend to be so busy. At times they pretend to have so many duties that they have to attend and forget the promises. And that is what is eating our country today. People were promising so many things, or they gave so many promises to people and even to God, not knowing that they might forget and they would rather go in a certain direction without remembering their promises. And now people are bitter. The Lord is bitter because many people, maybe they made a promise that when God will give me this chance to lead these people in this direction, I will be so truthful, I'll be just, I will be a corrupt free leader, I will do all that requires for a Democrat. But that is not happening today. And that's why a lot of things are happening. A lot of eruption of things is happening in our country. A lot of demonstration is happening. Why? People made promises that they are unable to fulfill. But it's not that they cannot fulfill, it's that they are denying the people their rights. They are taking more into their sides and to their pockets. They have gone into a point of greediness. They want to fill their pockets without remembering or without considering the people that put them in that seat. So many people might be asking, why is this happening? It's God who is angry and people are pressed. they feel like, no, it's too much. We cannot keep doing this an year and after an year. So we have to fight for our rights. It's not that there is anyone who is funding these maandamanos, but people are bitter. The Lord is bitter with those leaders that are on ground, the people who were chosen to stand in for the justice of the people, but they are not fulfilling what they promised. I want us to go through the story of David and Jonathan. When Saul was always on David to look after him and kill him, Jonathan was the best friend to David. So whatever his dad would plan to do, he would go and tell David and tell him to hide, to go away or far away from the Paris, far away from the surrounding, and hide in caves, to hide in the valleys and the mountains, so that his father could not kill him, because they were so afraid. They had a very great friendship, a friendship that had or it was fruitful. At times, some people pretend to be our friends, but they turn out to be our betrayers. David and Jonathan, they are a very good example that we can take for a friend who cares about you, a friend who cares about your life. Are our leaders caring about the lives of Kenyans? Are they considering the needs of the poor people? Are they considering the promises that they made? Are they fulfilling them? And that's why there is a lot of chaos, a lot of demonstration, people fighting for their rights. When we read about Jonathan in the book of 2 Samuel, when he was preparing David on how he would run so that his father would not get on him, they would talk even secretly, or even he would use bows and arrows to shoot, so that David, there was a way they were communicating, so that David would be in the hideout. So on this friendship, remember, even they made vows, and David promised that to Jonathan that whenever I get into that seat, I will remember you. Even if you will not be there, I have to fulfill my promise, the promise that I have made to you, that whenever I get safe and whenever I get to the kingdom, I will stand with your family. And now it comes a time that the whole family of Saul was killed. Saul was killed. Saul died. His sons were murdered, and all happened. And Jonathan was among those people who were killed. But now there was this son who was called Mephiboseth. Mephiboseth was a son to Jonathan, and when there was this chaos and the Saul's family was killed, the nurse who was taking care of Mephiboseth, when she carried Mephiboseth to run away, by bad luck, he dropped, and from there he became a crippled child, and he grew with the crippledness. And when now David became king, he remembered the promise that he made to Jonathan, his friend, and he asked his people, or the people that were in the Paris, is there anyone from the family of Jonathan or the family of Saul who has remained? And he was told about this son who was Jonathan's son, who was Mephiboseth, and he was told that he was crippled, and he asked for him to be brought in the Paris so that they could eat together, or have a meal together in the Paris. And that is what happened. Why? Because David never forgot the promises, or the promise he made to Jonathan, that whenever I get to the kingdom, I will remember your family. I will not let any of your family member to go or to suffer when I am in the kingdom. And that's what he did. When this happened, you find that so many people, or among us, so many people forget their promises. At times we forget where we have come from. At times we forget what we went through. And we see like those people who are down there, we degrade them, we oppress them, we see them like they are not they are of no importance to us. So we treat them unjustly with a lot of lack of respect, and we find ourselves like we have been living in the state that we are in today. So many people forget their promises, they forget their journey of life and how far they have come from. Others forget that to some point they were suffering, to some point they lacked food, to some point they were raised, or they were given support by some people, but they never go back to give thanks, or they never go back to say thank you. Why? Because we forget. We are so forgetful. It's only God who can help us not forget the promises that we make and the good deeds that people do to us. So I want to read in the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel chapter 9, and I will read how Mephiboseth was honored after David remembered the good things that Jonathan did to him, and he was not killed, and later became the king of Israel. So in the book of 2 Samuel chapter 9, it says, one day David asked, is there anyone left of Saul's family? If there is, I would like to show him kindness for Jonathan's sake. There was a servant of Saul's family named Ziba, and he was told to go to David. Are you Ziba? The king asked. At your service, sir, he answered. The king asked him, is there anyone left of Saul's family to whom I can show loyalty and kindness, as I promised God I would? Ziba answered, there is still one of Jonathan's sons. He is crippled. And where is he? The king asked. At the home of Machir, son of Amiel in Rodeba, Ziba answered. So King David sent for him. When Mephiboseth, the son of Jonathan, grandson of Saul, arrived, he bowed down before David in respect. David said, Mephibosheth, and he answered, at your service, sir. Verse 7, don't be afraid, David replied. I will be kind to you for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will give you back all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always be welcome at my table. Mephibosheth bowed again and said, I am no better than a dead dog, sir. Why should you do so good to me? Why should you be so good to me? Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said, I am giving Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, everything that belongs to Saul and his family. You, your sons, and your servants will farm the land for your master's Saul family and bring in the harvest to provide food for them. But Mephibosheth himself will always be a guest at my table. Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Ziba answered, I will do everything your majesty commands. So Mephibosheth ate at the king's table just like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah. All the members of Ziba's family became servants of Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth, who was crippled in both feet, lived in Jerusalem, eating all his meals at the king's table. And that's all that David would do, to remember the good deeds that Jonathan did to him until he was able to stand and God fought for him to become the next king of Israel. I believe that Mephibosheth was or he was not at peace when he realized that the king was calling on him, because he was the only son remaining. And remember, people had vowed to kill the Saul's family, but God preserved Mephibosheth for the royalty and the kindness of the king to be shown to him on behalf of his father. I believe that some of us are in a state that we have been put in a place that we can be able to fight for certain injustices and bring justice to some family. I believe some of us have been put into a certain level that we can show love and kindness to some people. At times, it's not about even our promises, it's about kindness. Remember that David was not greedy on the property and lands that Saul had, but because he knew that Jonathan stood with him, he was able to give back to Mephibosheth everything that belongs to his grandfather Saul. And that is what he would only do to show kindness and loyalty to somebody who did him well. How many times have you showed kindness? How many times have you shown loyalty to your promises that you made to some people? Either they have grown old or they are still young, or they have grown wealthy or they are still poor. How many times have you remembered? How many promises have you made to people before God that you are going to do them, but you have not? Remember, God fights in his own ways. In our country, we are experiencing all this because of the people who stood before many or the crowds of people to give promises that they are unable to fulfill. And it's not that they cannot fulfill, it's only that greed has led them. They have put their own self before the needs of the people that put them on those leadership seats. So it's good to always keep your promise. It's always good to be loyal and kind to the promises, or be a fulfiller of the promises that you make. But because you never know what might turn around against you and you start regretting, why did you make these promises? So you should not rush to making promises when you are not sure of how you are going to fulfill it. So be careful, be warned, be kind, be loyal, and remember to always do good. Whether you are down there or up, whether you are wealthy, whether you are poor, whatever God has entrusted you with, always be loyal and kind to people. Do whatever you promise. Always be kind. Do not be led by greed. Always show kindness and love to the people around you. May God bless you. I will see you in the next one.